Welcome to the Motherhood Mentor Podcast. I'm Becca, a somatic healing practitioner and a holistic life coach for moms, and this podcast is for you. You can expect honest conversations and incredible guests that speak to health, healing, and growth in every area of our lives. This isn't just strategy for what we do, it's support for who we are. I believe we can be wildly ambitious while still holding all of our soft and hard humanity as holy. I love combining deep inner healing with strategic systems and no-nonsense talk about what this season is really like. So grab whatever weird health beverage you're currently into and let's get into it. Welcome to today's episode of the Motherhood Mentor Podcast. Today I have the incredible Samantha on with me, and we dive into meltdowns. So if you are dealing with child meltdowns or you feel like as a mom, you are melting down, you are definitely going to want to tune into this episode. We also talk about journaling, how you can get into journaling, how journaling impacted Samantha's journey and really helped her become more aware of not just what she was doing, but how she was feeling, and even gave her tools to show up in new ways. This is such a great episode, and I'm so excited to share with you. So let's dive in. Samantha, I am so excited to have you today on the podcast. We are going to talk a little bit about meltdowns, but before we jump into the good stuff, I just want you to introduce yourself. So if people are new to you, they can find out more.
Hi, yes, I'm so excited to be here. So let's see, me in a nutshell, I'm Samantha Hawley. I live near Buffalo, New York, and I have a almost 4-year-old son. He'll be 4 in October. His name is Griffin, and I'm a single mom. I actually got divorced when my son was 9 months old, and I used journaling and therapy, but mostly journaling as my tool to process all of the big emotions. First is just being a new mom. I started off journaling many, many years ago, but it was more so like positive affirmations and like I am statements, or it was gratitude, like I am grateful for my healthy body, or I am grateful for this sunny day or something. And then it wasn't until I really allowed myself to honor how hard motherhood was as a new mom and how difficult it was to like manage being a mom and running my business and being a wife and all of the things that I turned to journaling to just really vent. I didn't really think of it as journaling. I was like, I just need this out of my brain and to like process this all. And it just felt so good that I kept like coming back to it. And throughout those pages, I kind of came up with a unique process that feels good. And I always leave my journaling pages and journaling entries with action steps that kind of get me closer to where I want to be. So as a single mom of an almost 4-year-old with full custody too, it's like my life is busier and crazier than ever, but it feels good and peaceful. And, I get excited to share that with others.
Yeah, I'm so excited to learn more about your journaling method. I think journaling is one of those things that people get really overwhelmed overthinking it. Like it's just so simple. For me, I've been in a weird funk lately and I was kind of overthinking it. And then all of a sudden I was like, wait, I really just need to get out a journal and put pen to paper and have a place to process. I think there's so much going on mentally, emotionally, and there's so much coming out us. I feel like journaling is a way to help us integrate and process and get it out of our heads and bodies and be able to kind of in a healthy way. I think people think disassociation is a bad thing, but I think there's also a healthy like space. And sometimes putting it on paper gives you enough like space from the thing.
Yes, I love that. Healthy dissociation. And like you said, it's so simple. But I think since it is so simple, so many people put expectations around it and almost like standards, like they need to journal for a certain amount of time or for a full page, or they need to have perfect grammar. That's a really big one that I see with my clients. Like they get nervous to journal because they don't write well, whatever that means, or, and I'm like, my pages are so messy. Today, I wrote the word realistic, but I wrote it like real, Real, I like completely incorrect. And I'm like, it just flows. And I'm like, I don't even go back and read it. So I actually created a free guide of like how to start journaling because it is so simple, but again, so many people get in their heads and like they need guidelines to say, okay, it's so simple, but I'm still not starting. So I actually have a freebie. It's like three simple tips of like just okay, but here's how you do it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, we'll definitely link that. And we were talking about going into meltdowns when our kids are having meltdowns. And I honestly think meltdowns happen in every season and every stage. They're just different for our kids and for us. I think there's like the kid meltdowns and then there's the mommy meltdowns. So tell me a little bit about your approach to meltdowns. Is this like a journaling approach that you do?
Mm. Yeah. So, like I said, my kid right now is 3. And
So
when
many
he
meltdowns.
turned, yeah, so many meltdowns. Starting from when he turned a year and a half, I remember he first started having meltdowns right around when I started sending him to daycare, and he really did not want me to change him for day. Like putting on clothes became the first thing that he would just like scream and cry on, and then putting shoes on was like truly a 10-minute procedure of just like putting on the shoes and getting out the house. And that was just the beginning. And now it's like, you know, not wanting the dino nuggets that I made him, or like the fact that I put it on the wrong part of his plate or something, you know? And so there's so many opportunities for meltdowns. And I've used to think that the meltdowns would not necessarily stop because I know that kids are learning so much about like emotional regulation and their feelings and whatnot, which I'm totally there for. But I thought that once he got older, they would get less frequent or less intense, and they're just getting about they're about different things. And I still felt triggered like about every it's whining for me. For other moms it's like the crying or the yelling and they're fighting, or each mom is triggered by something else. For me it's the whining. It's like nails on a chalkboard, and I'm just like, oh my gosh. And so for me, when I hear that, I was like, no matter what the age or what it is that he's crying about, I still feel triggered. And so that's my approach, is like, I want to figure out why I feel so triggered and to regulate that so that, yeah, hopefully, like when my child is 10, there's definitely less meltdowns, ideally, right? But like, no matter what, I'm able to like rebound from that and feel good so that I'm not triggered all the time and like walking around my house, like just waiting for the next meltdown or walking on eggshells. So yeah, I use journaling to do all of that.
Yeah. So I'm really curious, what does it feel like when you get triggered by your kiddo? Like, what is that experience like for you? Like, how do you know you're triggered?
Great question. So for me, it almost feels like I say my nervous system, but that's almost hard for some people to visualize. So for me, it's like the hairs on my arm like raised, but it's more of like an if that was like internal, it's just like my whole inside of my body just like goes up on edge, and it's just like, ugh. And it's like I hear my child and he's asking for something, and it's almost like I want to tune out because I'm focused on something else. Like as moms, we have so many responsibilities, right? And it always feels like the meltdowns happen when we're trying to make them dinner or start their bath or answer an email, do some work, make the bed and do some laundry. Like there's always something that we need to be doing. And it never seems like a convenient time for
Yeah.
them to be melting down or doing whatever it is that they're doing. And so for me, it's like equal parts what's happening to them and what I'm also trying to accomplish on my own, and having those two thing butt heads and like not being able to do the thing that I want to do, having to drop that and now help somebody else through their big emotion. Initially, it's just like a huge flare internally. And it's like a brief moment of like rage and anger, which I feel like is the emotion that I didn't realize was so normal for moms until I brought it up in my journaling community and they were like, wait, I resonate with anger so much. Like I have so much anger inside of me and I didn't realize it. And once I processed that, I like actually felt like I could be a better mom and I could be a better human and like show up the way that I want to.
Oh, you just touched on so many things that are so good. And I work with this a lot in moms of we start noticing this is not just me acting on my kids' experience. Like I have to be aware of what I'm experiencing. I think a lot of stereotypical parenting experts, they tell you what to do for your kid. Like they tell you what to do with the kid fits, but they're not addressing the way that you're experiencing your kid when they have fits. And I think the problematic thing with this is we're not making room for mothers to be human and to acknowledge the fact that it's like you can know all of the right things to do when your kid is having a fit, but if you are like exploding with rage and anger and you're trying to act calm, their animal body is not just going to be responding to what you're saying. It's the feeling, it's the emotion, it's that energy. And also, as women, as people, don't we deserve the same kind of care towards what's going on inside of us, what we're experiencing? And it's so dysregulating to be with these little people who are just, I actually think in a lot of ways, they can be more regulated than adults. And what I mean by that is that, like, when they're sad, they cry. When they're angry, they respond to their emotions. They feel their feelings. Adults have become so good at disassociating from ourselves and numbing ourselves or pretending that we're fine when we're not fine. And it usually ends up exploding out on other people anyways, or we burn out or we become so disassociated. But when you come back to this place where you can witness your kids having a fit, your kids having a meltdown, and then also what's happening inside of you. So when you do your journaling practice, is this in the moment? Is it later? Tell me a little bit about how that supported you.
Yes. So I do a journaling practice in the morning just because that's when I notice when I do it. And that's what I recommend for people is like if you do it at night, which is actually when we're more emotional, since we have all day to experience life in people. So if would love it if I journaled at night. I just can't get myself to do it. So whenever you want to do it, I pair it with my pre-workout in the morning. So that's just when I like to do it. So I do that. And then when we're talking about meltdowns, if it's a really big meltdown, I don't do it mid meltdown. That's, we have to deal with it then. But I have something that I like to call my reset ritual. And this is what allows me to come down from those heightened emotions, whether that be rage or anger or just dysregulation. I love that you said that like kids are more emotionally regulated because they know how their outlet for whatever emotion it is that they're having. And you're right, a lot of times parents don't. We have numbed that, and so, especially if you feel like you're in that numbed state, journaling can be that outlet for you. And so, there's so many different ways that you can have, like, or ways to go about creating your reset ritual. And it can include journaling. And the very first thing that I recommend doing is to just become aware of how it is that you're feeling. A lot of people say that you can name it. I don't do that because what I do is I write out what happened. And if a name pops up, like in the naming the feeling, I write it down, but I don't make it a point to. I more so write down the experience and honor what it is, how I'm feeling, and get that off of my chest. And honestly, sometimes just doing that alone allows me to release it. A lot of times I was waking up and doing my morning journaling session and I was writing down like, yesterday was hard, or yesterday was a lot, or like, yesterday was like heavy, like all of these things. And I realized like, I need to like learn to process it because waking up every morning and having that be the same thing over and over isn't working. So yeah, journaling after the meltdown, having this ritual. And part of it is journaling for me, but then also I believe that it needs to include things that will actually move that emotion through your body because anger and rage are really big emotions, right? So just journaling it isn't going to do all of the work. There is a brain gut connection where like our brain actually speaks to our gut and our gut to our brain. And our brain, which is like what we're thinking, and when we're writing, we're thinking a lot of things, speaks 20% of that goes to our gut, which is like to our whole body too. So if we're telling ourselves, like, I release this feeling and I'm feeling better and I'm feeling calmer, 20% of that message gets sent to our gut, which gets sent to our body. But like that's 80% of the rest of us is still heightened, still in that state of like, okay, cool, but this just happened. So the rest of the reset ritual for me is movement. Like I'll put on a song. For me, I like to put on Shake It Out by Florence and the Machine or Shake It Off by Taylor Swift. And even it won't be the full song, even, but I'll just like literally shake my body and like move my body. So it can be like movement, it could be breath work, it could be visualization. And I work with my clients one on one to be like, what makes you tick? And your listeners, you guys can even think of like, you know yourself, like what makes you tick and have that little quick, like 30-second reset. So after your meltdowns happen, your meltdowns or your kids' meltdowns, you have this little ritual that you can put on and then you move through them and you can process them more, in your next journal session, or that might be all that you need.
Yeah, I love that reset ritual idea. That's such a great idea. And one of the things you mentioned is when you were trying to go and journal each day, you were having this kind of heaviness from the day before, it sounds like. And I think something I just want to name is so many women, and especially mothers, are going through their lives not taking up any space to do that kind of processing. And that is why it can feel so heavy and overwhelming, is it just kind of starts building up. It builds up energetically, it builds up in our bodies, even like emotionally and mentally. It's like there's all of this stuff that you're not processing. You're not letting go of, you're not getting it out. It's like you're not metabolizing it. It's like you're having all of this food come in your body, but then you're never pooping it out. Like you need to be able to do that with the things that are happening in your day. And so I love that you mentioned like going through it in the moment and even talking about the experience when we're activated, what's happening for so many women. I don't think they understand that their nervous system, we can respond to our children as if there is a massive amount of threat. And to many women's bodies, your kid being emotionally dysregulated feels awful because you feel like it's your job to fix it. Maybe in your home, anger wasn't allowed. And we have all of these moms trying to teach their kids emotional regulation, trying to teach their kids emotional intelligence, trying to like not have bad feelings and good feelings. And I love that. I love that. And your body hasn't yet experienced those things. Like if anger doesn't feel safe to feel in your body, if your child is feeling massive amounts of anger, that can feel really scary if you haven't developed capacity and ways to move that through your body other than yelling, right? Because I think so many women are like, "Oh, well, I don't want to yell at my kids anymore." And I'm like, I'm on board with you. Like that's an awesome goal. And we can't just stop the yelling because you're still going to have all of this activation in your body and it doesn't just go away. It needs to be able to move and metabolize. And so I work with women somatically to do that. A lot of like body-based, again, I'm similar to you with, we don't have to necessarily name it, but we really play with sensation. What does it feel like? How does it move? Does it move up and out? And then following that movement in the moment. So, right, if you have this anger that's wanting to come up and out, can you breathe really heavy? Can you sing? Can you like do the little like blowing bubbles with your lips, doing something to allow that energy to move? And So when you're doing your reset, when you're doing your journaling, what happens when the kid is melting down for you? Like what supports you in that moment?
In the middle of the meltdown, that I think is perfect for what you just said.
Mm.
And what I'll often do is take a moment for myself, which my kid hates. So, one of my biggest pet peeves, and maybe it shouldn't be a pet peeve because Instagram is a highlight reel, but a pet peeve is on Instagram when these parent coaches are, like you said, there's so many coaches out there that are teaching you as the parent how to basically change your kid, like get them to melt down less, or the parenting tips on how to do XYZ with your child. And then, but they don't talk about how the kid reacts to that. Like they tell you, tell your kid, like it's safe to feel upset. You can definitely cry. And here are your two options, but you still have to get out of the bath. Do you want option A for your pajamas or do you want option B for your pajamas, right? Which I do to my child in a very calm and soothing voice. And my kid's still like, what? Like screaming, crying. I don't want to get out of the bath. Nobody tells you that, like, you still have to say it 5 times. They're
Tells you
still
that
going to be
it
melting
doesn't
down.
work. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
And is that what I hear you saying? Because that's my experience. My experience, especially in that season of life, is I expected that if I just do or say the right thing, my child will behave how I want them to. And I wanted them to just be obedient and listen, which is hilarious because on the other side, I also wanted them to be like these change makers who could like speak up for themselves and, feel everything. And then they did. And then I was pissed off about it, but it
Hmm.
didn't work on them. Like that's
Yeah.
really what I learned. I learned that I had to stop parenting in order for my child to behave a certain way. And I
Yes.
had to parent based off of I behave a certain way. And also I care for myself and lead myself in a certain way. And
Yeah.
I have seen that produce, I don't like saying results, but like the
Yeah.
relationship I see that I have with my kids, and just as important to me, the relationship they have to themselves. But I agree.
Yes.
I think even when you're doing all of the right things, your kid will not always respond the way that you want them to. It won't always work.
No. And I try that. And I will say it works over time. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's not like you'll try the one thing and, suddenly magically your kid is like, ah, yes, mommy, that is a great thing. Like now it clicks for me, right? Um, but that kind of brings me to a little bit of what you said, and something that does work is not focusing on the kid, which I think is opposite of what most people, not what you teach, but what so many people teach is like focus on the kid, either helping them, teaching them, but also even like become motivated by the kid. So like even think about like health and fitness is such a simple example of like get fit for your kids so that you can, run around with them in the long run and like be healthy for them. And that's a place where I differ. I feel like I've never done anything, and my main focus has never been for my kid or about my kid, because I know that my positive energy and how I feel, if I feel good, it will ripple into them. And I know that I don't want to feel like negatively, or I don't want to feel triggered. I don't want to feel overwhelmed. I don't want to feel any of those things more than I don't want my kid to have a mom like that.
Mm,
Right. And so it's definitely like our kids are great motivators, but I think once that motivation wears off, as it almost always does, like whatever that initial thing is, it's important to like what is the real like gut punch of like why are you really doing this? And I think for me, always been about me. So coming back to you and like, what is it that you really, really want to feel? Or for some reason, for me, it's all about what I don't want. So if it's hard for you to really become motivated by what you do want, what don't you want? Maybe you don't want to feel that resentment and anger, or you don't want to feel that overwhelmed, or you don't want to feel that triggered. And so what you do want is to have that sense of peace. And you want to create that calming ritual, and that sounds peaceful for you. And knowing that focusing on you will, of course, ripple into all of the other areas, your kids, your partner, if you have one, your all of your other relationships without it needing to be the focus. So, the whole analogy of like pouring into your own cup first, I think is a huge area that benefits parenting and like in every aspect of being a mom, just because there is so many responsibilities that we have, that focusing on you and less on the kid, as even as far down as the meltdowns, again coming back to how are you mid meltdown, back to your initial question, mid meltdown, asking yourself, how am I feeling? How is this activating me? And sometimes I will take a deep breath, and my son will say, Mommy, why are you taking a deep breath? Like he even recognizes it. And I'll say, like, I'm feeling frustrated and I just really need a deep breath right now. And he's right now learning, I think, what the word frustrated means, because he'll say it in times when he's really happy. He's like, I'm frustrated. I'm like, not quite, but we're getting there.
I'm so on the same page. And I do think that modern motherhood has, I think it has become so child-centered. And I think a lot of women feel it's necessary to center their entire emotional mental complex around their children. This is one of my soapboxes though. Like this is one of those hills I will die on, is because I experienced it, because I did that. And what I experienced is I did that with my marriage and I did it with my kiddo. I defaulted to what they wanted and needed. And I defaulted to attuning to them. And so much of what I was doing was trying to actively, I behaved out of how I wanted them to behave. I gave out of what I wanted to receive. And it almost became this relational manipulation. And I wasn't doing that intentionally. I wasn't like consciously thinking about it. And what happened is that like my kid is melting down and I'm so focused on them feeling good that I lose my sense of self. I'm thrown off center. So it's like I was constantly at the whim of my child's emotions because I was centering my motherhood around my child, not around me, myself, the mother, right? Like if you're trying to change your parenting, focus on the parent. That's you. That's like actually acknowledging what you need, what you're feeling, what you're experiencing, what you don't want. I think when women come to me and they're like, I don't know what I want. I don't know what I need. And I was like, complain to me. Like write down everything you don't like, because everything you do like, everything you do want is hidden in those things. But you're so insistent on feeling good and grateful all the time and pretending that like everything's good and great, that you're not accessing this deeper level of self that's going to be the thing that drives you, that allows you to show up in the behavior that you want to do. So even mid meltdown, noticing that like if you have relationship and access to yourself, you can show up to anything with your kid. If you have the capacity to be with everything that you're feeling, it will create the capacity to parent your children in the way that you want to. So even if you're wanting them to help their meltdowns, you're never going to be able to do that if you don't show up to the way that you're melting down, to your dysregulation, to the things that are going on in your body. So I love your point of like using the mid meltdown and then even taking some time after. I do think it's really powerful, especially if this is like a regular occurring thing to you, to start noticing like what's going on here. We spend so much time overthinking and kicking ourselves while we're down, right? Like so many moms are so critical of themselves of like, I yell at my kid and it's like, and then you go yell at yourself and your head. And it's like, instead of giving yourself an opportunity to say like, hey, what's going on here? Let's like actually do a check-in of what's going on. So what are some of the things that you journal about and check in on after the fact?
Yeah. So after a meltdown, one of my favorite prompts, and this would be definitely a reflection. So maybe like the next day or after a few meltdowns, is what I like to call the boundary arc, kind of going based off of what you were saying as well with, you're holding on to ourselves and who we want to be and how we want to show up is the boundary arc. And so I think about a particular meltdown situation or again, a group of them. And I think about what happened and I kind of like outline it, especially if I don't feel as triggered, where I can look at it from more of like an outside, like bird's eye view. And I just look at what happened, like from to um beginning to end. So I'm just trying to think of an example. I remember when my son and I were co-sleeping, which I was not a fan of co-sleeping. I'm not sure if you or your listeners' thoughts on that, but it did not work well for me and my son. And so there's this one night. Oh, also my son loves chocolate and he asks for it nonstop. And so there's this one night my son was in my bed. I was trying to get him to calm down. It was taking like 1 to 2 active hours of me like yeah, active hours trying to like get him to calm down. And he asks for chocolate, he asks for another book, all of these things. So that's the beginning of my boundary arc. Is like the very first thing, he's in my bed and he asks for this thing. He makes a request, right? And then the next thing is my emotion, right? I haven't even responded yet, but fear, I instantly have fear of like, I'm about to set this boundary of no more chocolate, no more books. We've already read this thing. We've already read, our 2 books or whatever the limit was. So no. So I have this fear that when I say it, he's going to come back and have a meltdown. Like the anticipatory anxiety is what I call it, or the anticipatory fear. And this is all in my head, by the way, before I even say anything. And then, so I have that he's going to have that. And then I'm going to want to compromise just because that's the type of person I am. And something else we talk about in my private coaching is self-sabotage and all, the 9 different types of saboteurs. And mine is people pleasing. So I default to compromise where can we meet in the middle? But then I feel resentment at the end because I didn't even want to, I didn't want to read the other book. I didn't want to do the chocolate. And I always go back on my boundary. And so I never feel like I feel heard. I feel like, right, like I got my end of the bargain. So that's my boundary arc. That's my arc. And so in my journal entry, I go through all of that. And that alone, you might have a lot of revelations and aha moments of like, oh my gosh, this is how I handle every situation. I know when I did that, my revelation was like, oh my gosh, that's how I handled my marriage. Like my ex-husband, I was like, my ex-husband was acting like a child, like that, and to his defense, I was acting that way too. Like I was fearful of his response, so I was defaulting to compromise and whatnot, and that's on me. And so from there, like I said in the very beginning, I always love ending my journal prompts with action items. So like, okay, I choose how I want to feel, but then like, what can I do to inch closer to that? And so, especially in this boundary arc situation and further meltdowns, how can I choose to insert a boundary and where would it be on that arc? So for me, where it would be was right after he requested the extra book or the chocolate or whatnot. That's where I wanted to practice is simply stating what it would be. And so that's where I wanted to focus is just stating it. For you, it might be stating it and then maybe not making the compromise. So you could choose anywhere on your arc that you want to practice. And then the key after that, after the boundary holding, is tolerating the discomfort. And ever since learning that, I've heard that in so many different capacities, even like with emotional eating and whatnot. But tolerating the discomfort when I'm going to say no more chocolate and no more books. And like my son's not going to be happy about that and choosing to feel okay. And once I journaled through that and just a lot of journaling is proactive. So this all of this is like next time I will say no more chocolate, no more books, and I will choose to feel okay with that discomfort. It's going to be uncomfortable. I'm not going to like it. My son is going to cry. He might have a meltdown and I will be okay. And just literally writing that out and that alone gives you so much like empowerment and authority and access to a version of you that in the moment you don't know that you have. In the moment you kind of feel like a plastic bag in the wind of like, I don't know, sure, okay, I'll do that. Or opposite, and you're like you hardline it, and then you feel bad because you're like yelling at your kid at night, and then he gets activated or she gets activated, and it's like a storm right at bedtime. And so yeah, I like doing that arc if you've never done anything like that. And then kind of recapping, seeing any revelations, understanding where you want to insert a boundary that feels good for you, that feels empowering to you. And then it's just practicing it and then kind of reviewing your arc later on and making adjustments from there.
That is so powerful what you just shared. And I love the way that you share about like the arc of the boundary, because I think so many women are having a lot of boundary violations with their kids, and they don't realize that that's where a lot of the overwhelm and anger and resentment is coming. And I think what's specifically really hard in motherhood is that there's so much that we really legitimately do not control. And I think that
Mm.
toddler phase is where it really gets hard, because you suddenly realize like, oh, I can't make them do so many things. Like
Yes.
and their response to your really good parenting is often not quote unquote good. It's not comfortable. It's not this like, oh, thank you, mom, for setting boundaries. Like, I love you so much. Like, thank you for doing what I need and not just what I want. Like,
Yeah.
no, our animal bodies don't want to be told what to do, even when it's ourselves, even when it's our brains and bodies will do a lot to avoid discomfort. And I think what's really beautiful about journaling is you're giving yourself the opportunity to go into moments where you face those choices and bringing you back to your agency. It's recognizing that like there's so many moms who I think are on autopilot. And then I think women come out of autopilot and they start noticing how they're responding. They start noticing how they're feeling, but they don't feel the agency to take action because it feels like their nervous system is choosing for them. Their triggers are choosing for them. It's just happening and they don't realize it. And I love this powerful perspective of journaling and like the arc of noticing what are like the different access points to what this happened. And it's bringing you back to choice. It's bringing you back to agency. It's bringing you back to, I have a backbone. I am an
Yes.
adult. I am an adult. This is a child and this is not urgent. And honestly, like bringing this back to like the nervous system regulation that we were talking about, so much of nervous system regulation is learning to feel the present moment and noticing what is dangerous and what is not, right? Like your child having a meltdown actually isn't urgent or dangerous to you or to them. It feels that way. And I think again, when we're attuned to our children, we're looking to them to see, are we okay? Am I doing a good job as a mom? And it's like, they're a toddler. They're not going to be able to give you that information. Like, yes, we want to be paying attention to the relationship. There is some information coming from them, but we have to be connected to what we're doing, what we're choosing, what we're not choosing. And I think I love that arc of that's what I'm hearing in it too, is what are you choosing and what are you not choosing? And then bringing you back to this place where you're not just aware of that surface level, what was happening, you're aware of what's almost like I'm trying to think of a way to say this. It's like we forget that we're the ones pulling the strings to ourselves. We feel like we're just
Mhm.
this puppet going through the motions. And it's like, no, you're pulling the strings, your body, your nervous system, your brain. And you have agency and access to change that, even when it comes to like your emotions.
Yes. Yes. Agency was the word I was trying to think of. And that's agency and choice, right? And I want to say too, because this might make moms that are listening like me feel better too, is that the choice that you might make doesn't always have to be the hard boundary, you can also make the choice to give chocolate at bedtime, right? You can also make the choice to read the other book. And when you consciously make the choice, like, yes, this is okay for me, it feels so much better than when you're in the moment and your kid asks for chocolate at night and you're like, oh no, what do I do? And then you decide to give the chocolate, but then you feel guilty because then you think, oh no, I shouldn't have done that. Chocolate isn't good at bedtime, right? But then when you have taken the time to journal through this and almost anticipated and then you'll eventually get to a point where you're kind of obviously not journaling in your head, but thinking through this in your head, you'll get to a point where you can ask yourself this question in your head. And I did this one night with my son, and I gave him like a smaller, like a mini Hershey kiss before bed. And I felt totally fine with it. Because in my head, I was like, do I want to do this right now? And the response was yes. So, and I was like, yes, here you go. You were great today. And whatever, for whatever reasons I had, I'm giving you this treat. And it felt way better than when I was kind of like going back on myself and going back on my word and like judging myself for that. And then there was also a night where he asked for something. I asked myself in my head and kind of went back to what my boundaries, what I wanted them to be in my journal entries. And I said no. And his response was, okay, mommy. And literally my head exploded. I was like, wait, excuse me? You're fine with that? Like in my head, I was going to set the boundary and I was prepared for a meltdown. I was literally like, brace yourself, Sam. Like, this is going to be, you can handle this. And he said, okay. And I was like, oh, like the world didn't just end. And that proof of him being okay with that was just like, wow, that it was the extra reinforcement of my agency and my choice that it was okay and that the world will go on. And I felt extra good about following through on what it is that I wanted to do. Anyways.
You were fully embodied in your choice, no matter what you chose. That's what I'm hearing. And I think this is such a powerful concept because so many women are still trying to play this good girl thing where there's some magical right thing to do. Like there's some magical right way that is going to make, I mean, this will get me on a whole nother like soapbox moment of we are trying to make perfect the human experience for our children and for us, which is just not possible. Like it's meant to be messy. It's meant to be human. And we're supposed to have all of these emotions. And if we can create an environment for us to have that, what's beautiful is our children start experiencing adults who are living in their embodied authority. And what I mean by that is like when we say yes, our kids know that we mean it and that we're not going to hold it over their heads. And when we say no, our kids know that we're going to back that up. Or if we change our mind, it's going to be actually changing our mind. It creates safety for our children because now they are attuned to a mother who is attuned to herself. They are not attuned to a mother who is just all over the place because she's constantly looking to a child to be emotionally regulated instead of looking to herself to be emotionally regulated, right? And that's literally the power of turning your attention from your kid back onto yourself. Because if you have that, your kids, even on an unconscious level, can feel that you are a person they can trust. They will feel that you are a person who is embodied in what they are doing and what they're not doing. And relationally, how safe is that? I mean, think of if you were dating or in a friendship with a person who you could never really trust that when they said yes, they actually meant it, right? Mm-hmm. Or have you ever been with a girl who like, she's so insecure that she can't tell you what she wants or what she needs. And then she'll tell you, but you get this feeling, you have this knowing, you're like, you're bullshitting me. Like, feel it. You can feel that there's something off or something weird or something ingenuine. And that's a powerful force. And I really do think it impacts our parenting in a way that is I think it can, I don't want to scare people and give us even more things to think we have to get right. Mm-hmm. You know, oh, good. Another thing I have to think of, but you are not a checklist that like you have to cross off to do. you are a person who deserves to be related to. And I love your process. And I think something I want to name, you mentioned it, but I want to bring this back. The powerful thing about journaling or coaching or doing this process, like giving yourself time and attention to do this work, that's how you start processing things. So instead of running on autopilot, or instead of becoming burnt out because you didn't notice that you've been crossing your boundaries, you start noticing and you start processing in real time your emotions. You start regulating your nervous system because you're actually paying attention to when you start getting triggered, not just when you've flown off the handle.
Hmm. Yeah, and we've talked about a lot of things, feeling triggered and people pleasing and setting boundaries and anger and so many things. And like you said too, we don't want to be a checklist where it's like now journaling is like one more thing to do either, right? But my tip for anyone listening who's like, okay, I'm recognizing some of these patterns in myself and I want to show up as that safe space for my kids is to start journaling where it doesn't feel good because that's going to be the easiest place to tap into. I think it's honestly the hardest days to journal is when everything's going right. It's when when the days that feel good, I wake up and I'm like, la-di-da, what do I journal about? But it's when my life is hard. That's why I started journaling during my divorce or right beforehand, is because there was something easily I could tap into. So if you're going through a tough time with your kids or even just personally, emotionally, whatever, start there and just honoring it, becoming self-aware is the very first step so that you can open yourself up to processing it. Because you've said the word a few times, which I think it's truly accurate of where most moms are because there's so much on our plate, is autopilot. We don't give ourselves the space to think about anything besides our routines and responsibilities. And we come home from work and then, okay, it's dinner time and then bedtime routine. And then we got to do it all over again tomorrow. And then you go to bed feeling like depleted and you wake up hoping you feel inspired, but you're still burdened from the day before. And then it's all over again. Right. And so whatever, if that's you, like whatever part feels like the most draining or heavy for you, allow yourself to tap into that. It might feel a little bit scary if you've never allowed yourself to tap into that, but I promise you, shining a light on that is going to feel so relieving.
Yeah.
And I was the type of person who was like, positive Polly my whole life up until I started journaling. And I was like, oh, negative emotions, dust it under the rug. And there were good emotions and bad emotions. And I like would never ever look at the bad ones. And I would only focus on the optimistic view of everything because I thought looking at the bad stuff would either bring more of the bad stuff, right? Or I just didn't want to get stuck in it. But looking at it shows you so much of who you are and how you were raised, and you can question those things. And especially if you have the process to like journal through it, you won't get stuck if you know that you don't want to stay there, right? And so if you're listening to this and you follow Rebecca, I know you don't want to stay there. You know who you want to be, you know where you want to get to. And so just honoring that and knowing it's okay to listen to your inner knowing and to trust yourself and to tap into these, some of these scarier, darker emotions that you might be feeling.
Yeah, man. And what you said is just so powerful. And it's so funny how I've literally had to relearn this lesson so many times because this was exactly, I shared that I was kind of in like a funk, I was off, and I was avoiding those harder emotions. And I wasn't doing it on purpose, but all of a sudden I started noticing I'm resentful. I'm feeling like a little bit numb. I'm feeling a little dissociated. I was like, there's something deeper going on that I'm avoiding because it's inconvenient, one, and it's uncomfortable. And once I started journaling and once I started giving myself some space, it was some deep grief. It was
Mhm.
some sadness. And I think what's powerful is I was able to give myself room to feel it and to let it move, and then to be able to sit with it and say, is there anything that needs to be done? Like, is there actually movement in my life, or did this emotion just need to be able to move through me? Right. Because for me, at least what was coming up is it was some past stuff that I've never accessed before from this level of maturity. And it just needed to be felt and it moved through me. And then it was fine. And then sometimes you'll allow it, you'll journal, you'll feel these things, and you'll notice something needs to change. And I think that can be really scary. And I think that's one of the reasons women will avoid their feelings is there's the scary of having to feel it, which is hard. But then there's also the scary of once I know this, once I tell myself the truth about how this really feels, I'll have to do something. And I encourage women, what if you just start with the knowing? What if you just start with the feeling and telling the truth? Because once you start telling yourself the truth, you will begin to trust yourself again. And from that place, that's where you'll be able to take action from, but you don't have to take action until you know what that is. Like you don't have to take action right away just because you feel that. And I think that's why women avoid doing things like the boundary arc, whether it's in parenting or marriage. Like that's another big one, right? Like they're going to avoid acknowledging the boundaries that they're accidentally breaking because they don't want to set a boundary. And it's like, what if you just start with acknowledging it, with telling the truth, with feeling it, and you get to know it? Because once you get deep enough in that awareness, you will know what to do. And then you'll be able to feel your agency and your backbone. And then you'll be able to choose what you're doing. And then you'll be able to have your own back, just like you did, like with your son. Like sometimes you said yes, sometimes you said no. So that is so, so powerful. Is there anything else, any other like closed loops or things you want to share before we close out?
One thing that inspired me to start journaling was a quote I heard in a book, and all it said was, "How good can life get?" Just
Mm,
think of that and you will make different decisions, is what the book was saying. And I heard that and I was like, well, I don't, how good, and that can actually be a journal prompt for your listeners. Like, how good could your life get if you let it? What might change and what might that look like? Right? Like, you can, whatever this means to you, however it's hitting for you, journal on that. And that's what allowed me to open up because, yeah, if I think back to my marriage, there was a little tiny voice way before I was even married, where if I knew like what I know now, I would have listened to her, right? And that's why I say that journaling is one of the bravest things that you can do because I very consciously, very self-aware, chose not to listen to that because I wasn't ready to face that. And it brought me down a path to where I am today, which I feel like I'm here for a reason and in this space now, which I love. But yeah, I chose that to not listen. And I think that with journaling, it will bring you down a path that you will be grateful for because the end result is, like you said, self trust, self love, higher worth. Like you're going to be this, like, it's embodying who, like, this ideal version of yourself that you don't even know that you can be yet. And you will only uncover her as you allow yourself to like meet her, right? Like through your journal and whatnot. So yeah, I love that prompt for you of how good can your life get if you let it. And then also really super simple tip is knowing that you do not have to journal every day. I know that's one thing that stops a lot of people. The research says that journaling 3 to 5 days a week for 5 to 15 minutes a day is all you need to reach all of the benefits of reduced stress, reduced overwhelm, even improved immunity. And there's a really cool research study of 3 different groups of people. They were all about to get surgery and one group didn't journal at all. One group journaled before they got surgery, about 2 weeks before, and then one group journaled after the surgery. And they found that the group that journaled 2 weeks before the surgery healed 11 days faster than anybody else. And so it concluded that, like, if you actually journal about these traumatic events and like feel the scary emotions, you're actually processing them and you're actually like healing your body and allowing them to like somatically, right? Like have it move through you and like heal you faster. So it doesn't need to be a ton of time. It doesn't need to be every day. And the benefits can be profound.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool. What a fascinating study. I'm not surprised. And I think too, I think this will get women doing this work is when I promise you that like this is not blocking your productivity. Like
Mm,
your feelings and this deeper work of like journaling and taking time for yourself, when you make space for it, when you make time for it, it absolutely gives you energy. It gives you
yeah.
access to your most potent like life force, like your essence, like that spark you want, that like access to like your creativity and even just like your ability to connect with your kids, like all of that is found in your deeper self. It's found in these moments where you're taking time to develop you, to keep growing and maturing. And I think how beautiful that we're starting to make time for this in early motherhood, and that our kids get to grow up with moms who are full people. Like
Mm,
they are full women. They're not just these robots who do everything the kids want. Like how beautiful that kids get to have a mother who is self-aware and who is showing up for herself. I think it's profound. And I think it's showing this next generation how to adult in a way that maybe a lot of people have never seen or experienced. This was such a fun conversation. There's so many cool things. It's so hard to end it. And this was so beautiful. And oh my gosh, that journal prompt, how good can life get, is such a beautiful place to end it. So where can people find you? Where's like your favorite place to hang out if they want to learn more about you and working with you?
I love connecting with women, so I would love for you to send me a DM on Instagram and we can chat. And I love hearing about like your season, like what you're going through, how old your kids are. So yeah, you can find me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is samantha.s.says. I also have a website. It's samanthapenkoff.com. You have to put the www in front. I have my own podcast and YouTube and whatnot. But yeah, if you want to connect with me on Instagram, you'll find all of the other links there.
Yeah, and we'll put it all in the show notes and everything. So thank you so, so much for being here today. And I cannot wait to hear what people think of this. And we would love, love, love to hear how you experience this, what your aha moments are, if you have any more questions, if you're going to start journaling. So definitely reach out to us.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. This is so fun.
Being here. Thanks for joining me on today's episode of the Motherhood Mentor Podcast. Make sure you have subscribed below so that you see all of the upcoming podcasts that are coming soon. I hope you take today's episode and you take one aha moment, one small tangible piece of work that you can bring into your life to get your hands a little dirty, to get your skin in the game. Don't forget to take up audacious space in your life. If this podcast moved you, if it inspired you, if it encouraged you, please do me a favor and leave a review. Send an episode to a friend. This helps the show gain more traction. It helps us to support more moms, more women. And that's what we're doing here. So I hope you have an awesome day. Take really good care of yourself, and I'll see you next time.